Thank you very much. The next item of business is a statement by Kate Forbes on a budget update. The Cabinet Secretary will take questions at the end of her statement, and so there should be no interventions or interruptions. And I call on Kate Forbes.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. My objectives in this budget statement today are to give as much early clarity to businesses, public bodies and communities, and to be as transparent as possible. This is a budget for the nation, reflecting the challenges facing each family and business. But to deliver certainty, this Parliament must pass the budget. I have now met with every party individually and collectively to help reach an agreement on the 2021-2022 Scottish Budget. We're still in the throes of a national emergency. It's an important point that this Parliament works together to respond to that. In advance of final allocations in the spring budget revision on the 25th of February, I can confirm further 2020-21 non-recurring COVID support will be made available as follows. £275 million to support COVID pressures, including for lost income in local government, and councils will have the freedom and flexibility to decide how it is deployed to support the range of COVID pressures they are facing, ensuring continuity for the critical services they provide. £40 million for local government to support the ongoing deployment of safety mitigations within our schools. That builds on the £50 million that we had previously committed and provides certainty to local government as we proceed with the phased reopening of schools and early learning and childcare settings. Thirdly, £60 million for further and higher education. That includes £40 million of resource funding to help colleges and universities maintain research activity, protect jobs and help students, and £20 million of additional capital to boost research and knowledge exchange. £25 million to tackle poverty and inequality, and together with projected underspends on wider measures, this will enable us to make two key investments. Firstly, a further £100 COVID hardship payment for children and young people receiving free school meals on the basis of low income. The funding offered will also enable support to be extended to children who receive free lunches within early learning and childcare settings. However, we know that it's not only families with children that are struggling financially. Therefore, I am also announcing that we will increase the funding available to councils to tackle financial insecurity in their local areas by an additional £20 million. And last but not least, £5.7 million for COVID pressures on forestry. The UK Government has confirmed this week that for this year we will be provided with a further £873 million in resource, £236 million in capital and £41 million in financial transactions on top of the previously guaranteed £8.6 billion. Whilst this is, of course, welcome, reflecting the late stage in the financial year, it can and will be carried over into next year. The following funding proposals are subject, obviously, to parliamentary approval of the budget and will be taken forward in the event that our 2021-22 budget assumption of an additional £500 million of COVID consequentials is realised and that requisite funds are available via the Scotland Reserve. The fact that this funding is likely to be non-recurring constrains what it can be used for. Presiding Officer, when I presented the budget last month, I made clear that if resources allowed, I would extend 100% non-domestic rates relief for properties in the retail, hospitality, leisure and aviation sectors for all of next year. I am now in a position to provide that certainty to business, meeting the #1 ask of the business community and demonstrating our commitment to supporting the economy. To ensure that resources are targeted at those who need it most, we're working with councils to ensure the application process will be live ahead of bills being issued. In addition to extending 100% relief for these sectors, we will continue 100% relief for newspapers publishing in next year with careful consideration of the NUJ's conditions, and we will defer the removal of charitable rates relief from mainstream independent schools to the 1st of April 2022. The impacts of COVID will last beyond this academic year, and we need to continue to support a longer-term programme to enable children to catch up on missed education. Therefore, we will provide a further £60 million to support and accelerate that process. This will be available for purposes including ensuring that the levels of teaching and support staff in schools can continue to meet the needs of children and young people across all parts of Scotland. We're aware of the financial impact the pandemic has had on households and want to provide support during this time. So I'm also today confirming that we will invest an additional £100 million next year to help low-income households in the year ahead. We will announce more details of this investment in due course when it has been fully discussed with COSLA. I want to ensure that the UK Government will not claw back any of the support we provide, for example, through reduced benefit payments, and will therefore be asking UK ministers to help us help people in hardship during this difficult time. Presiding Officer, we know that mental health impacts of the pandemic will be significant, and how tough this past year has been for those with pre-existing mental health conditions. So I am today announcing £120 million for a mental health recovery and renewal fund, which takes our total spend on mental health next year in excess of £1.2 billion. The fund will ensure the delivery of our mental health transition and recovery plan. It includes a headline focus to improve specialist CAMHS services, to address long waits and to clear waiting list backlogs. Nearly £10 million will be allocated to speed up treatment in psychological therapies waiting lists for adults. We recognise the need to focus on supporting people at the earliest possible stages, and so we will invest in enhanced community support. And we will also provide significant additional support for mental health in primary care settings. Over the summer period, NHS boards developed new processes for admissions for elective surgery in line with infection control measures. And in September 2020, elective surgery activity was at around 65% of the level in the previous year. So today, I am also announcing a further £60 million of investment in waiting times recovery to enable NHS boards to start to address the pandemic-induced backlog, remobilise our services and improve access to hospital-based services. Presiding Officer, moving on now to capital. I was unable to go as far as I would have liked in supporting the provision of affordable housing due to cuts in our capital funding from the UK Government. But I can now confirm today that I will be allocating a further £100 million in grant and £20 million in financial transactions for affordable housing next year. That means that we will now invest over £3.5 billion in housing over the next 5 years, with more than £3.4 billion delivering more social and affordable homes in communities across Scotland. Presiding Officer, to support a green recovery and to help us meet our climate ambitions, I am also today allocating an additional £45 million of capital to heat decarbonisation, energy efficiency and fuel poverty for next year, bringing the total for heat and energy efficiency in the budget to over £258 million of capital. Presiding Officer, I have two further points to make. To support a sustainable economic recovery, I am now proposing an additional £50 million in capital for town centres and 20-minute neighbourhoods for next year. That will bring this year's investment for the place-based investment programme to £105 million and will support regeneration in local communities. We know that the tourism sector has suffered deeply due to the pandemic, and we want to support its strong return so that when the time is right, we can all enjoy the world-class offerings that Scotland has to offer. I'm therefore pleased to be able to provide a further £10 million in capital funding specifically for tourism infrastructure in our rural communities next year. That is separate to the doubling of the Rural Tourism Infrastructure Fund that was already published in the budget. Lastly, Presiding Officer, I am also proposing an additional £32 million for local bridges maintenance, on which we will set out further detail shortly, to rebuild and maintain key lifeline bridges like the Bernera Bridge, which has been raised with me by Alistair Allen as well as Corlia and Elaine Shear on several occasions. And so, Presiding Officer, as I come to a close, in the interests of transparency, I have set out the additional funding at my disposal for next year's budget and how I wish to deploy it to support our national recovery. I am sure that each party in this chamber will recognise something in my statement today that they have called for, and I will continue to work with all parties in the chamber to help deliver a budget for the nation fit for these times. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The Cabinet Secretary will now take questions on the issues raised in their statement. I intend to allow around 20 minutes for questions, after which we will move on to the next item of business, and it would be helpful if members who wish to ask a question were to press the request to speak buttons now. And I call Murdo Fraser.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. Can I start by thanking the Cabinet Secretary for advance sight of her statement. As she outlined this week, we've seen additional funding of £1.1 billion from the UK Government being providing, demonstrating how the broad shoulders of the United Kingdom are helping support Scottish public services, businesses and individuals in these very difficult times. Can I welcome the various announcements today, and in particular welcome the extension of 100% rates relief for businesses in the retail, hospitality and leisure sector for the next 12 months, and the extension of rates relief to newspapers, both issues that the Scottish Conservatives have been calling for to be addressed. So I welcome those. And can I also welcome additional funds for education, although I fear they may fall short of what is required if we are to close the attainment gap and redress some of the damage we've seen done over the past year. But I really want to ask the Finance Secretary today about the issue of business support. Every day I, like most other MSPs, are contacted by businesses who are fearful for the future, who are running out of cash fast because they are not eligible for existing support funds, perhaps because they are legally still permitted to trade, but nevertheless have lost a large amount of their business. These businesses are now being pointed towards the local council discretionary funds, but the payments available to them from that source fall far short of recompensing them for the losses they've suffered or giving them the resources they need to survive. So will the Finance Secretary look again at how direct business support can be provided for those businesses currently teetering on the edge, who are falling through the gaps in terms of existing funds and support available?
Cabinet Secretary.
The fact, of course, that I'm doing an update to the budget just 2 weeks after publishing the bill illustrates the difficulty of setting a budget whilst waiting on dribs and drabs of funding from the UK Government. So I would gently push back on the notion of the broad arms of the Union, but will repeat my gratitude for funding to help us to respond. And I'm also appreciative of Murdo Fraser's welcoming of this statement because, of course, and he said it himself publicly, the Tories have asked me to extend non-domestic rates relief, defer non-domestic rates for independent school, increase funding for housing and local government. And all of that, of course, is delivered and done in today's statement. And so in comprehensively meeting the Conservatives' asks, all eyes will now be on the Conservatives, because I hope that they will consider passing on that goodwill to the businesses and the households of Scotland by enabling passage of the bill, which provides for ongoing support and clarity. That is what the nation needs right now. Specifically on business support, I agree that we need to continually keep the support under review. That's what I do. The discretionary fund, of course, is discretionary by nature, up to local authorities, what they distribute, at what quantum, what value and how. In terms of the funding that's available, 94% of business support is live. Most of the grant schemes, bar one, are up and running, and those sectoral schemes are specifically designed to fill gaps in either the furlough scheme, self-employed income support scheme, or the strategic fund. We will keep that under review, but we can see quite categorically that we are trying to reach as many of the excluded as possible, and I'm always willing to go further where possible.
Thank you. I call on Jackie Bailey.
Can I also thank the Cabinet Secretary for an advance copy of her statement? Firstly, can I wholeheartedly welcome the extension of non-domestic rates relief for many businesses for all of the next financial year, a key ask in Labour's budget priorities, and providing certainty for businesses for the period ahead. But it is the case that the eligibility criteria for business support is too tight, and not all the existing money is being spent. For example, 57% of the Coronavirus Restriction Fund was allocated, but 4,000 applications were rejected. So will the Cabinet Secretary urgently review the criteria for business support funds so more businesses get help? Secondly, let me also welcome the additional funding for health services and particularly for mental health. But it falls, I think, well short of what is required. In England and Wales, mental health spending is more than 11% of their overall health budget, and by comparison in Scotland, it is approximately 8% of the health budget. In light of the increased demand for mental health services for people with existing conditions, never mind people with new mental health problems, will she commit to a greater percentage share of NHS funding being allocated to mental health as called for by the Royal College of Psychiatrists?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, in terms of the members' questions, and again, I appreciate her welcome of a number of different points in the budget, and of course, for businesses to enjoy non-domestic rates relief, we need to get the budget through the Parliament. And so I hope that Labour will be considering very carefully how they enable that to provide clarity and certainty to the very businesses that Jackie Bailey has just asked questions on behalf of. In terms of business support, we have set out three main ways for businesses to get help. Strategic Framework Business Fund, the main fund, approximately £250 million paid out in January. Secondly, we have tried to reach the excluded through sectoral schemes. I am always open to reviewing sectoral schemes, but of course, every new sectoral scheme requires some additional support. It requires local government in particular to distribute it. So it's important that we target that well. But lastly, the discretionary fund, which has now been quadrupled to £120 million, specifically endeavours to fill all the gaps. So where eligibility criteria can be changed or tweaked, we will do that, but I think it's important that we continue to get funding to those that haven't had any yet, rather than build on what has already been provided. She talks about, Jackie Bailey, talks about the health service in terms of the additional funding for mental health, which I again heard her welcoming. If she believes that it should be a greater percentage share, of course she knows that I'm open to all and any proposals. But Labour will need to prioritise its proposals, because from PAYGI or local government to now mental health, I think it's important that the Labour Party prioritises, and I'm more than happy to work with her.
Patrick Harvey, to be followed by Willie Rennie.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I'm grateful for the advance sight of the statement, and in particular the additional funding for energy efficiency will be very welcome. Ensuring that a green recovery can be done in a way that saves people money on their household budgets. But there is a need to go further on achieving those savings for household budgets much sooner, in particular given the fact that there are fewer than half the number of applications for the Scottish Child Payment as there are eligible children. Is the Cabinet Secretary continuing to examine other ways that we can expand eligibility for universal benefits, such as free bus travel and free school meals?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I have appreciated the constructive and ongoing discussions with Patrick Harvey and the Green Party in terms of where the budget should go further, and this statement certainly reflects a number of points that he has made. Normally, budget negotiations are done behind closed doors, but I thought it was important to update Parliament, and I look forward to continued discussions with the Greens on their priorities, particularly around anti-poverty measures and energy efficiency. But absolutely, unequivocally happy to continue the discussion on universal benefits like free bus travel, and he will know that the instrument has already been laid in terms of last year's budget negotiation for securing free bus travel for under-19s, and I want to continue to negotiate and work constructively in seeing where we can go further.
Willie Rennie, to be followed by Tom Arthur.
I'm pleased that the Finance Secretary has returned to the Chamber today to make the statement following the additional resources allocated from the UK Treasury. She knows that we will negotiate on this budget and will work constructively and seriously to get an agreement. We must cut mental health weights and improve delivery, which is why we're debating that exact subject in this chamber tomorrow. And the new mental health funds today will help meet that challenge. We welcome also the additional allocations to business, newspapers, NHS, energy efficiency, but also for our hard-pressed councils and education services. But specifically on the council funding, does the amount that the Finance Secretary has announced today match the shortfall that's been identified by COSLA?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I thank Willie Rennie for the question and his commitment to working constructively. He helpfully did ask for 3 things in the budget bill, and I think all 3 of them have been reflected in the statement today. Additional £100 million for mental health, more money for education to help young people, as well as ongoing business support. In terms of the specific question about local government, that £275 million does not have any strings attached. It is entirely for local authorities to determine how they will spend. The caveat I would put is that it's non-recurring in terms of funding. So it's to help with COVID-related pressures and in terms of working with local government. I'm sure local government, a bit like the Scottish Government, can always identify additional pressures and additional ways that they would like to help communities and households. But I think it was already a fair settlement, and a substantial increase of £275 million will really help and go a long way.
Thank you very much. Can I encourage succinct questions and answers to allow as many questioners in as possible? Tom Arthur, to be followed by Maurice Golden.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I welcome the announcement of an additional £100 million for low-income households, something that I know many of my constituents in Renfrewshire South stand to benefit from. However, I am concerned that there is a risk of a clawback from Treasury via the benefit system. Can the Cabinet Secretary confirm that she will urge the UK Government to make sure that all of this money goes into the pockets of those who need it most and is not clawed back via the benefit system?
Kate Forbes.
Well, we have previously received reassurances from HMRC and DWP with regards to the exceptional steps we've taken to support people impacted by COVID this year. And on this basis, understand that the funding provided through the COVID Spring Hardship Payment and through support offered by local authorities to tackle financial insecurity will not be taken into account for benefit or tax purposes, a point that is also covered by the fiscal framework. So as we develop proposals for the £100 million of support next year, we ask the UK Government to extend those reassurances to ensure that the money is not given with one hand and taken away by another, and we'll engage with our counterparts in the UK Government to seek that assurance.
Maurice Golden, to be followed by Annabel Ewan.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. The Cabinet Secretary has just announced funds for tourism recovery, which is welcome, but any benefit will be hampered by the SNP's plans for heavy-handed new regulations on short-term lets. The Scottish Guesthouse and B&B Alliance have said the plans are the final straw in what has been the most depressing of years. Does the Cabinet Secretary recognise the best way to help Scotland's B&B sector recover is to scrap plans to introduce these cumbersome regulations?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I'm not sure that that's related to capital that I've just announced at all, but on the specific point, he'll know that Kevin Stewart has announced a working group with sector representatives who will look at the concerns that have been raised and will actively work on solutions, including amending legislation where that is required. But 2 further points, if I could, because of course the tourism infrastructure reflects the challenges that were faced by a number of local communities, particularly in rural areas, who were overwhelmed in some cases by campers, camper vans, and the infrastructure the capital here will go a long way in terms of ensuring that there is sufficient infrastructure in place. And of course, secondly, I would have also expected Maurice Golden to welcome the fact that we've just launched funding for B&Bs who pay council tax, and they will get the equivalent of the Strategic Framework Business Fund, which I'm not sure is replicated to the same extent elsewhere in the UK.
Annabel Ewing, to be followed by Sarah Boyack.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. As we know, children's education has been significantly impacted as a result of the coronavirus pandemic. So can the Cabinet Secretary at this stage provide any further detail as to how the very welcome additional funding that she has announced today will actually be used to help children in my Cowdenbeath constituency and indeed children across Scotland catch up with their missed education?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I think this funding will certainly help Annabel Ewing's Cowdenbeath constituents, because clearly the impact on young people has been substantial. So the £60 million of funding will support local authorities and schools to take action. Now that would include issues like learning loss, health, well-being, and as I set out in the statement, the funding will be available for purposes including ensuring that all levels of teaching and support staff in schools can continue to meet the needs of children, including those in Cowdenbeath. We'll work alongside local government to ensure the investment delivers maximum impact, and will update Parliament in due course on the detail.
Sarah Boyack, to be followed by Alistair Allen.
Cabinet Secretary, today's additional money for councils doesn't address the additional COVID spend and loss of income gap reported to us by COSLA, nor that councils were already hit by £937 million cuts to non-core services over the last few years, which will be crucial to community and economic recovery from COVID. So will the Scottish Government use its own underspend and UK consequentials to deliver the investment needed, and also make sure the council tax-free zone offer is actually baked into next year's budget?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I'm unaware of the underspend that she refers to, but in terms of the funding here, it contributes significantly to the challenges that local government is facing in terms of the figures certainly we've seen for loss of income, and will go a long way. A few weeks ago when I announced the budget, I indicated that there would be an increase in the funding for loss of income. That more than doubles the funding that's available for loss of income, so we'll go a long way. But I'm aware that next year's budget for many local authorities is more challenging because of the ongoing impact of the pandemic. So we will work with COSLA to ensure that we understand the impact and provide funding where it's required.
Alistair Allen, to be followed by Jamie Green.
Can I welcome the Cabinet Secretary's responsiveness to the arguments which I have perhaps rather unsubtly been making about the need to replace the bridge to Bernera, an island off an island. And can I ask if she can provide information on the likely timescales for further details on the funding for bridges more generally, which she has mentioned?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, in terms of the specific answer, I will update Parliament as soon as possible with the specifics of the detail, but Alistair Allen has been very active in raising concerns about the bridge. I've also met with Corrine and Ellen Shear about the bridge, and I hope that this fund will provide essential support in maintaining lifeline services like the bridge in the Western Isles, but also bridges elsewhere.
Jamie Green, to be followed by Stuart McMillan.
Thank you. On the 9th of December, this Parliament voted by majority for free school meals for primary pupils to commence in the new financial year. That vote passed by 59 votes in favour. Can I confirm that the Government is respecting that decision, and now that the funding is there, will today's announcement deliver it in line with this Chamber's wishes?
Kate Forbes.
Well, I always think it's fascinating that Tories here can vote for free school meals and vote against free school meals south of the border. But in terms of the funding that I have agreed today, there are two particular funds that I would refer the member to. One is providing additional support to families who are in need, and we will continue and maintain our commitment to free school meals as well. But secondly, the support too to help young people when it comes to education, which I think is also a Tory ask.
Stuart McMillan, to be followed by Claudia Beamish.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I was pleased to hear the Finance Secretary will invest £100 million for low-income households in the year ahead, including in my Greenock and Inverclyde constituency. Can the Finance Secretary therefore provide some further detail if this intended support will be wider than low-income families who are also being helped through an additional hardship payment?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I know that Stuart Macmillan has regularly raised concerns on behalf of his own constituency in terms of low-income families and the impact of deprivation and COVID on top of that. So in terms of the funding, we anticipate that we will use the Council Tax Reduction Scheme to identify individuals who could benefit from this additional support, and we'll work very closely with local authorities in COSLA to deliver the additional support. Again, as with all of these things, I will provide the specific detail in due course, but I hope that goes some way to helping Stuart Macmillan answer questions from his constituents in light of the huge impact of not only the economic crisis, but also the health pandemic.
Claudia Beamish, to be followed by Kenneth Gibson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I note the increase in the statement today of an additional 45 million capital to heat decarbonisation, energy efficiency and fuel poverty. While today's announcement is a welcome good step, Cabinet Secretary selling the specific, and I stress specific, energy efficiency budget to 244 million to make a really significant inroad into fuel poverty, bringing local jobs across Scotland and lowering our emissions, as called for by Scottish Labour in this budget and a number of NGOs and charities.
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I think that's another request from Labour to add to the very long list of requests from Labour about how to change this budget. And of course, I'm open to many requests from Labour, but all of them need to be costed and then prioritised. In terms of the energy efficiency issue, we recognise that not only is it a way of reaching our statutory fuel poverty and climate change targets, but it's also a way to revitalise the economy. Now, we have committed already to allocating almost £1.6 billion of capital to heat and energy efficiency over the next 5 years. So this additional £45 million will go a long way to help with next year's budget and ensure that there is sufficient capital in place to deliver on schemes including Energy Efficient Scotland and the Low Carbon Infrastructure Transition Programme.
Finally, and briefly please, Kenneth Gibson.
Presiding Officer, additional consequential funding is always welcome. However, does the Cabinet Secretary agree this Parliament should not have to find out about consequentials weeks or even months after the UK Government's associated policy decisions have been made? And does she therefore agree it's now urgent that further fiscal flexibilities are provided to Scotland, enabling us to respond more effectively to this crisis?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I think the principle there is sound, because in developing and building this budget, I was quite clear that I didn't have all the information available to me, and we built a budget that was fair to households, to businesses, and ensured our response to the ongoing pandemic. But the fact that I'm standing here just a matter of weeks after that budget and in advance of stage 1 of the budget demonstrates that getting information in dribs and drabs does the people of Scotland no service, never mind this Parliament and this government. And of course, I'm always grateful for additional money because it can help us to meet some of the needs that are out there. So some additional flexibilities which had cross-party support would go a long way in helping us to smooth over some of those risks. But in the absence of any flexibilities, then we just have to deal with the situation as we find it.
Thank you very much. That concludes questions on the statement. My apologies to late bidders for questions who could not be called due to time, but we will move on in a moment to the next item of business.